Hi there, thanks for tuning in again. In this particular video, I want to talk to you about a BIP and what it is and what it looks like for Dylan. So if you were like us a few years ago, you probably have no idea what a BIP is and what it stands for. So if that's the case, this video is for you. And I'm going to explain what it is and give you an example of what Dylan's looks like and what some of the results of the BIP that you might see in the classroom. Alright, so let's get started, and we'll start with a definition of a BIP, or the Behavior Intervention Plan. So the definition really is a plan that's based on the results of a functional behavioral assessment, also often referred to in the classroom setting as an FBA, Functional Behavioral Assessment. And at a minimum, the BIP should include the following things. It should include a description of the problem behavior, some sort of a hypothesis of why the behavior is occurring, and it should also include intervention strategies for encouraging the positive behaviors. So before you can implement a BIP, it also needs to include the following things, one of which is a baseline measurement for the problem behavior, which should include the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of that problem behavior. It should also include the intervention strategies for not only intervening towards that negative behavior and how we respond to that, but how to encourage the appropriate behaviors that we're looking for. And lastly, it should include a schedule to measure the effectiveness of this intervention plan. So Dylan's particular, or at least his most recent BIP, has been in place since October of 2018. And that was a result of a functional behavioral assessment, an FBA, that was performed by 2 external psychologists that came into the classroom, did a lot of observations, collected a lot of data from the staff, the teachers and the aides, and then used that information to identify what the problem behaviors were, what the interventions should be, and how we were going to measure that. So the FBA for Dylan really targeted 3 specific behaviors that we were trying to work on: aggression, property destruction, and voiding in the classroom. So in the beginning of the BIP for Dylan, it first defines what these behaviors are so that everybody's on the same page about what it is specifically we're looking for and we're trying to prevent as far as aggression, property destruction, and voiding. So you can see an example of that here on the screen. And then secondly, it gives some definition for the staff around the intensity levels so that they can help us track that as well. You can see that here on the screen. One of the important aspects of the BIP, of course based on the ABA philosophy, is providing positive reinforcements to Dylan for the acceptable behaviors that he displays. So there's a list of positive rewards for Dylan, things that would reinforce the good behaviors for Dylan. And that would be things like taking a walk, playing on his iPad for a little while, playing catch with his teacher or aide. These are all things that Dylan enjoys doing, including, of course, the occasional snack or food treat that he might get for good behaviors as well. So having those rewards defined and strategy for when they should be used and when they shouldn't is really important as part of the behavior intervention plan as well. So any good behavior plan not only needs to identify what the problem behavior is, but a plan for how you're going to respond or react to that behavior when it manifests itself in the classroom or even at home. So the response or reaction plan for aggression for Dylan is, first of all, an immediate stop and a firm voice. Tell him to calm down. Then we repeat the expectation or offer him a choice. So in other words, if we're asking him to do a task and he gets aggressive, we'll repeat the expectation to do the task, or we'll offer him a choice. Often the choice would be either do this task or take a walk or take a rest or whatever that might be. We try not to include the really positive things like the iPad or the food in these things, especially if he's just manifested an inappropriate behavior. But we will give him an option of taking a walk or taking a rest, because since he's nonverbal, it may just be an avoidance function, trying to avoid that particular task, and it's manifesting as aggression. So we'll give him the alternative of trying to communicate the fact that he wants to take a rest or he wants to take a walk. If his behavior continues to escalate in the form of aggression, then they'll immediately remove Dylan into what we'll call the calm room or the sensory room for him to calm down. We'll tell him in a firm voice, sit down, calm down, and then we'll give as limited amount of attention as possible. A lot of times the behavior itself is attention seeking once it gets to that point of escalation, and he's looking for a particular reaction from us. So the limited amount of attention is really important, to not give attention to that negative behavior. So sit down, calm down, and then as little attention as possible to him, but trying to monitor his safety, of course. And then as he starts to calm down, then we'll tell him, when you calm down, we can return to the classroom. And then worst case, if the sensory room, the calm down room, doesn't get Dylan to calm down or reduce that aggression, then the staff now has a plan in place to remove Dylan further into the seclusion room. And that's for his own safety and for everyone else's safety. And the seclusion room at Dylan's particular school is set up just for that. Thankfully, we have not had to resort to seclusion so far this school year, although I'll show you some data points here in a few minutes where that was not the case from the previous year. One of the other behaviors that we're trying to address is the property destruction. So there's a couple of things that the BIP calls out for property destruction, and it kind of varies depending on what it is that Dylan is doing. But if Dylan is trying to break things that shouldn't be broken, for example, tearing papers or something like that, there is a method in place to provide alternative, more appropriate, quote unquote, destruction opportunities for Dylan if it's a sensory thing that he's seeking. So they have craft sticks at school that Dylan can snap in half, taking apart Legos and things like that. So they'll stop the negative behavior and they'll try to replace it with a more appropriate behavior that might satisfy that sensory thing that he's seeking. In other aspects of the property destruction, sometimes Dylan will throw things or flip things. So flip chairs, throw the iPad, things like that. In those cases, again, it starts with a firm stop, removal of whatever it is that Dylan's trying to be destructive with, if that's possible. But next, they have a plan to provide Dylan with 3 really quick imitation exercises. So in other words, they ask him, touch your head, touch your ears, give me a high five, something like that. And that cognitively makes him have to think about doing those things, and many times takes him off that task of trying to be destructive with something. So that's kind of a high level of the things that are included in Dylan's behavior intervention plan today. I'll show you a couple of charts here. One of them is for the 9th grade school year, which was last year for Dylan. And as you can see on this chart here, this is a count of the behaviors, the number of behaviors that occur on a given day from the start of measuring, which was October of 2018, through the end of the school year last year, which was, of course, May of 2019. And as you can see from this particular chart, the count of behaviors was still significantly high for each day, but it started to take a downward trend about halfway through the measurement. And then, as you can see, it started to escalate again towards the very end of the school year, unfortunately. This next chart here shows the same information, but broken down by the time of day to kind of see if there was a time of the day where Dylan was more likely to manifest the negative behaviors, early in the morning, during lunch, or towards the end of the school day. And as you can see from this particular chart, again, for the 9th grade year, the behaviors tended to manifest themselves more likely after lunch and at the very end of the school day. Some of the causes for this, we think, could be because One, the behavior intervention plan at the time was a little bit more complex. It required a lot more data collection and physical hands-on monitoring by the staff, which I think caused some staff fatigue, especially towards the end of the year, and I'm sure fatigue for Dylan as well. So here next I want to show you, and try not to jinx myself here by doing this, but I want to show you Dylan's 10th grade year. So right now it is November of 2019. He's about 3 months in, almost a full semester into 10th grade, and things seem to be going better. Here's a count of the behaviors day by day, and as you can see, the behaviors have significantly dropped off as far as the number of behaviors manifested each day. And then here's the breakdown of the behaviors broken down by the time of the day. And as opposed to last year, now the few behaviors that they do see tend to more often be either first thing in the morning or at lunchtime. So we'll have to kind of try to understand why that's different. And that'll be some conversations that we have with the staff to try to understand if there's something about those certain times of the day that's more likely to aggravate Dylan or not keep him on task. So as you can see, so far, so good for the 10th grade school year. The behavior plan that's in place really seems to be helping to address some of these negative behaviors we're seeing. I think there's a couple of other causes for this downward trend in behaviors. One is a staff change for this year. This year, Dylan's teacher is a man, and so are all of his aides. I think personally that makes a difference. Dylan is 15 years old. He's a big boy. He tends to defer more likely to a man as he would to a woman. And I think that the men tend to be less intimidated by Dylan's behaviors than maybe the female staff would be, and that's completely understandable. Sometimes Dylan's behaviors intimidate me. So I think the staff changes has helped not only to keep Dylan on task, but to set the right expectations of what behaviors are acceptable and what are not in the classroom. That may be helping as well. And of course, the behavior intervention plan is simplified just a little bit, so it makes it less taxing on the staff be able to do that. This is an idea of what a behavior intervention plan is and what it might look like for your particular child. So as always, thanks for tuning in. Hope you found some value out of this particular episode, and don't forget to click the subscribe button here if you haven't done that already, and check out the other videos I have recommended here on the left. Until next time, have a great weekend. Thanks.